Hello, this is Julia Flynn Siler, and I'd like to take you on a walking tour of some of the places and people I visited in researching my book, The House of Mondavi, which began as an article that ran on the front page of the Wall Street Journal in June of 2004. My research for The House of Mondavi started at the Italian village of Sassoferrato, which Cesare and Rosa Mondavi left at the turn of the century to travel by steamship to America, passing through Ellis Island and then on to the iron mines of Minnesota, and then to the town of Lodi in California's Central Valley, where they raised their 4 children, Mary, Helen, Robert, and Peter. I discovered the ghost stories about the old Charles Krug winery in St. Helena, which the Mondavis bought in 1943 and which became the new locus of their family business, as the family itself expanded. Robert built his own winery after he was banished from the family business by his mother Rosa and his brother Peter. He started over by journeying a few miles down Highway 29, which is the artery that cuts through the Napa Valley, to Oakville. This is from a grape stomping party in the early days. Although Robert's eldest son Michael, pictured here on the right, had the title of winemaker in the early days, in fact he worked under his father's shadow for many years. Some of the people who worked at the Robert Mondavi winery, including Mike Gergich on the left and Warren Winiarski on the top right, later went on to produce the wines that won the famous Paris tasting. Robert was helped along the way by many people, but especially by his second wife, Margaret, who was more sophisticated than he was in terms of appreciating the food, wine, and the arts. Robert also sought out the French, who in the 60s and 70s were considered the best winemakers in the world. He struck up friendships, particularly with the colorful Baron Philippe de Rothschild, a famous bon vivant who liked to do business in bed, as shown here with the label designer Susan Pate. Across Highway 29 from the Robert Mondavi winery in Oakville, the Mondavis and the Rothschilds built their temple to fine wine, Opus 1, which some described at the time as looking like a spaceship plunked down in the middle of a vineyard. The valley that Robert's son, his younger son Timothy in the middle, and his older son Michael on the right, was a very different place than the one he'd first arrived in the late 1930s, when prunes were still a bigger crop than grapes. By the 80s and the 90s, the Robert Mondavi winery was the location for some of the valley's most glamorous and over-the-top parties, including this Out of Africa party, which featured all kinds of animals, including this elephant, and chimps that had to be provided with diapers to prevent them from pooping on the guests. Yet as the Mondavis were courting distributors and the media with their lavish entertaining, a pest called phylloxera lurked in the vines, and the family faced a massive replanting bill. To finance the replanting they needed to do, they decided to go public, and they set up a dual-class shareholder structure that gave the family about 80% of the voting control. At the time of the initial public offering, they believed the company was takeover-proof. But a decade later, at the 2004 Napa Valley auction, which is an event the Mondavis helped found to raise money for local charities, the Mondavis were on the verge of losing control of the company Robert had started. A group of outside directors, dubbed the Raiders, orchestrated a board coup that stripped the family of control. The Raiders were led by a British executive named Sir Anthony Greener. That meant that while Robert and his sons had hoped to pass along the business to the 4th generation, in fact they ended up selling it for more than $1 billion. To another pair of brothers, Richard and Robert Sands, who also ran a publicly traded wine company called Constellation. The sale was bittersweet for the Mondavis, but it also led them to try to begin healing some of their decades-old wounds. Thank you for listening and joining me on this tour.